The desperation behind Onlyfans. Lonely men and unemployed women have flocked to the adult site over lockdown. What's wrong with trading youth and beauty for resources? Today, Me Too has framed this dynamic mostly in terms of abuses by powerful men. But while I'm sliding comfortably into middle age these days, I can remember the thrill of being a perky young woman, and getting older men in positions of power to do things for me. I also do remember, in the last city job I held, watching with grudging admiration as an office receptionist on her second job sidestepped the entire corporate hierarchy to be appointed company secretary on a six-figure salary, with her main qualifications being, as far as anyone could tell, her close personal friendship with one of the senior brokers. If you've got it, why not make use of it? In the digital age, that means you're an idiot if you're satisfied with posting thirst traps on Instagram instead of monetizing your simps on Onlyfans. Founded in 2016 and used predominantly women creating and selling adult content, OnlyFans doesn't publish reports on its visitors' numbers, but the company's headcount appears to have trebled over the course of 2020. Its Twitter following has grown by 84% over the same period. An insider reports that the website has seen a 75% month-on-month increase in signups since April this year. We shouldn't be surprised. The period between July and September saw 181,000 new UK redundancies, the most brutal spike in job losses since the Great Crash in 2008. On top of this, Matt Hancock's Q&A this week confirmed, albeit obliquely, that under Tier 3 restrictions, there's no shagging allowed unless you already live with your sexual partner. So as coronavirus has annihilated offline jobs, along with our scope for in-person socialization, a digital meeting point for attractive but skint young women and lonely men with money to spare was bound to grow in popularity. And alongside articles discussing OnlyFans, alongside other creator sites, there's also been a drive to normalize online sex work. Even the London Fresh Sheet Metro has published a how-to guide for would-be OnlyFans entrepreneurs. So what, you might ask? At least if they're generating the content themselves, as Ariel Anderson points out, OnlyFans gives would-be erotic models considerably more scope for control of their content than is often the case. By comparison with Pornhub, for example, a website notorious for its laxity in taking down footage, even underage rape, this is surely an improvement. But the meteoric rise of OnlyFans is less of a story about market for sexy images than it is about two trends with apparently only an oblique relationship to sex: social automatization and stagnating youth employment. Both these phenomena long predate the COVID era. Loneliness has been discussed in recent years, with ONS reporting that the number of people in the UK living alone went up a fifth between 1999 and 2019, from 6.8 million to 8.2 million people. This isn't just the elderly. The majority of this increase is driven by the number of men aged between 45 and 65 living alone. Nor is the shrinking of employment opportunities for the young COVID-era phenomenon. In 2016, the BBC was reporting stagnating graduate wages, while a 2018 ONS report shows that non-graduate young people fare even worse. But COVID has brutally accelerated this trend. The BBC reports that young people are more likely to have been furloughed, as well as being hit disproportionately hard by redundancy, and make up a third of the new universal credit applicants. The TUC reports that women aged 25 and under have been at greater risk of job losses during the pandemic. But just as it's accelerated other societal fractures, such as educational inequality, the pandemic has leaned into both these trends. But again, you might ask, so what? Isn't OnlyFans just a formalization of a sexual marketplace we've always had, in which young women trade dewy skin and luxurious curves for resources? Certainly, this marketplace notion is a well established idea today. In fact, it's a view of men and women that crops up both in feminism and curiously also in anti feminism. For example, in the bleak worldview of incel, involuntary celibate men, marriage is understood as a system of legislated prostitution by which a man bribes a woman with food, drink, resource security, emotional security, amazing sex, and often a place to stay. This in exchange for letting him have regular sexual intimacy and to know who his children are. But in case you imagine that feminists are keen to challenge this perspective, think again. Viewing committed relationships as indistinguishable from prostitution is a well-worn feminist argument. Radical feminists only. Wrong. Teen Vogue, the Bible of intersexual pop feminism, assures us that, far from being exploitive, sex work is real work, and many young women who use sugar baby websites to meet and earn pocket money from wealthy older men in exchange for sex frame what they're doing as feminist empowerment. This is all backed by a popular understanding of the sexes borrowed from evolutionary psychology, in which men compete for the opportunity to spread their DNA and women compete to attract the man with the best chances of supporting children with an overall sexual marketplace. Women in this view put out mainly as a way of securing resources. If we feel uncomfortable about sex work, it's really our unease as the way exchanging money is just saying the quiet part out loud. According to Kathy Rainswitz, a sex-positive writer and campaigner, most female whorephobia comes from us, mostly unconsciously, viewing sex workers as scabs in the sexual marketplace. Women are afraid that if men are allowed to easily, safely buy sex, they won't commit to financially supporting any one woman for life. But does this actually give a good account of what men and women want? It's not at all clear that we've always seen sex as a marketplace. A keyword search of Google's database of millions of books, for example, shows dating marketplace practically unheard of before the 1970s, at which point, along with sexual marketplace, it begins to grow rapidly in popularity. Nigrum isn't perfect, but the results suggest that thinking of sex in market terms is a trend that's been gathering pace for decades. And yet, in the grand sweep of human culture, a few decades isn't a very long time. If we didn't think of sex as a marketplace before the 1960s, why are we so keen to treat it like one today? Because for all that it's become a common cultural trope, it's also not clear that a dating marketplace describes what men and women actually want. I'm too old and married to have first-hand experience of dating today, but a straw poll recently among 20-something friends suggests that reality might be more complicated than the raw sexual Thatcherism implied by the marketplace trope. For example, Matt, not his real name, a 26-year-old straight man dating in London, described a situation radically unlike the one set out by incels or sugar baby feminists. As Matt sees it, it's not so much young women as young men today who yearn for relationships. Men seem to settle into okayish relationships more than women do, he told me, because the competition is so fierce and that they basically cling to something that is acceptable, but not what they really desire. Women seem to have more choice and can dictate terms more. But for Matt, this isn't about sexual access. Rather, it's another sign of ebbing possibilities for his generation. An occasional point of conversation among my male school friends is to moan about the fact that most of our dads were married, having children at our age, he said. His is a bleak vision, not just sexual prospects for his generation, but of the prospects for everything. The failure to settle down is just another reason for our generation to wonder why we are so useless. Pop science invocations of evolutionary psychology in the context of dating advice tends to assume that males seek sex, women seek commitment model. But if Matt and his friends are anything to go by, this vision of men as rampant lubricants DNA spreading horn dogs just isn't the whole picture. And indeed, once you delve into actual evolutionary psychology, it's clear that the field is far more nuanced than pop representations would suggest. This paper, for example, makes the case that the males compete, women choose model mate selection just isn't the whole human story, because in reality, men don't just impregnate women and then disappear. Rather, humans, both sexes, the whole prefer to cooperate on raising families. From this perspective, the dominance of a marketplace understanding of intimacy doesn't reflect reality so much as colonize it. And this hyper focus on a competitive transactional dynamic that is really only part of the story comes at the expense of corporate yearnings that are in fact equally valued by both sexes. And by formalizing the competitive picture of a sexual marketplace, Onlyfans contributes to this crowding out of corporate, cooperative human intimacy by synthesizing something a bit like it as a product for paying subscribers. An aspartame version of intimacy sweet enough to hit the pleasure centre, but of questionable long-term health benefit. Thus, OnlyFans virtualizes and monetizes the complex and shifting field of desire, longing, and human connection in a form perfect for the lockdown era social landscape of atomization, loneliness, and unemployment. It's a perfect dating marketplace reproducing the most asymmetrically competitive transactional elements of male-female desire without any need for mutuality, generosity, or crucially for human touch. It's a truly 21st century vision of love. That's it.